Professor Yotam Ophir, University of Buffalo. Welcome to The Public Diplomat, episode 19.
Hi, Guy. Thanks for having me.
Okay, every single professor has received a bunch of emails telling them that everybody needs to move to Mastodon. Why is everybody in the academia abandoning Twitter and moving to Mastodon?
So for a long time, we built an academic community that was very vivid, engaging on Twitter, in part because it's a platform that's based on text and not on images or videos. And I guess academics feel more comfortable using text. But of course, in light of the recent changes in Twitter and the what many perceive to be a hostile takeover by Elon Musk and the changes that he does to moderation, academics are now searching for a new home.
Okay, so let me be a little hostile towards you in a loving way. Twitter has had very, very problematic content moderation for a very long time, right? So I'm going to give you the other perspective. Twitter has been very active in censorship. It does not allow dissenting voices. It kicked off a U.S. president who was elected by half of the country. It told people they cannot speak openly about COVID during the time of Corona, when there are a lot of questions to be asked. I mean, the list goes on and on. What happened now that everybody in academia decided it's time to leave Twitter? What's the big difference?
Well, the big difference is Elon Musk himself, of course. I think that what Musk has been doing in the last couple of weeks is to redesign Twitter in his image, basically leading the tone of the platform towards what seems to be kind of a trolling, Fortune 8chan style, chaotic cesspool, basically, which many of us have avoided for years. As you said, he also decided to bring back some of the voices that myself and others do perceive to be not just misleading, but dangerous to people's safety and to the health of society.
Okay, but Yotam, I'm going to challenge you again. Twitter gave a voice and still is given a voice. So before Elon and after Elon, to the Ayatollah of Iran, who is actively involved in killing people actively. I mean, this is not like theoretical. This guy is responsible for a lot of death around the world. He calls upon the destruction and the killing of Israel on a daily basis. The heads of the Taliban, right, who completely oppress freedom and women in Afghanistan and responsible for so many deaths around the world, have a Twitter account. They're not censored. Twitter has always been a dumpster fire of speech of people who, from both sides of the aisle. What's the difference now?
I think that what you're saying and how it connects to my belief sets about social media in general is that it seems that content moderation at the moment, and it's not just Twitter, it's Twitter and it's Facebook and it's Instagram and it's Pinterest and YouTube and whatnot. Content moderation for years had been a pretty arbitrary process, one that's being determined by the whims and kind of mood of a couple of very rich people sitting in Silicon Valley. Those are often young, white, very rich men who have been deciding what is and is not allowed on their platforms, basically at the moment, like kind of improvising, trying to maybe put fires down. I think what happened now is that Elon Musk is kind of not changing much as reminding us of how vulnerable that these systems have always been and how much they are in need of a revision. Now, I don't know if you and I are going to agree on it, but in my view, that revision will have to include some sort of regulation. I honestly don't want either Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jake Dorsey or any of these guys to be the person who decides where the line is drawn on the sand when it comes to misinformation and hate speech. In part because mostly because I just don't trust any of them.
I'm going to completely agree with you. Nobody elected these people. These are out of touch elites who live in Silicon Valley, New York City, wherever they are. They are out of touch and they feel like their political worldview is more legitimate than that of most people around the world. They have the power. Just to give an example, when Parler was established, right, automatically Amazon Web Services took it off. And now we have Apple threatening Twitter to take them out of the App Store. Now, these businesses have absolute legitimate right to have whatever business practices they wish to, but the effects on democracy are meaningful and substantial. So let's talk about the role of technology companies in democracy, Yotam.
Well, I mean, to understand the role of technology in democracy, we need to understand the role of public spheres, right, in the establishment of a healthy democracy. I think pretty much every political scientist in recent memory emphasize the importance of allowing a place for individual citizens to talk with one another, to deliberate, to bring up ideas and contemplate them with those who agree with them, but also with those who do not. That's why, Jürgen Habermas thought the cafes in Europe in the, 19th century were so important. And it was always mediated through news media or mainstream media or mass media of sorts. So in the case of those cafes, what people used to do is to bring newspapers, open them up on the table and start fighting over it, right? It is now the case, of course, that a lot of these discussions have moved to social media, which means that social media now provide one of the maybe less kind of, arenas that allow us to actually talk with one another about politics, especially with the other side, as opposed to the doom prophecies of the early 2010s. It doesn't look like social media puts us in filter bubbles. It looks like, if anything, we are a bit more exposed to other views on social media. So it becomes a really important place for citizens to express their views, learn about the world, and negotiate the meaning of living in a country, in a state, in a city, or in a whole, global community.
So this leads me to the tension between not offending people online and protecting free speech. So let's throw up on the screen a recent poll from the Pew Research Center. And it asked people to choose what is most important, to protect free speech or to create a safe and welcoming environment online. Now, the statistics here are very confusing, as both teens and older people feel like it's more important to create a welcoming and safe environment online versus protecting free speech. How would you understand these numbers, Yotam?
Right. I mean, yes, there is something a bit awkward here, where the population that doesn't seem to be in favor more of protecting the vulnerable is the 18 to 29-year-old, which I wouldn't expect. But I think what you see in this poll is basically that society is divided on this. I mean, sure, we can break it down by age, but we can break it down by other factors, and we'll get different conclusions. It seems that the American society at this moment is not completely in consensus about it. Part of it, I think, is that people don't fully understand what it means to be harassed or targeted online. It's not about not feeling comfortable. It's about minority groups being harassed and threatened. I mean, it's about LGBTQ people getting death threats and rape threats and things like that. So from what I can guess from these numbers, I'm assuming that different people have different perceptions about what it's risk, what's at risk. And it seems that some populations are more familiar with those potential detrimental effects, I'm assuming.
Yotam, I want to point to the bleeding of this phenomenon away from social media to the real world and university campuses, where it seems like the need to protect and create a welcoming and safe environment is much more important than free speech. I mean, many have argued that the least free place for speech in the United States these days are college campuses, where dissenting voices and opinions are not really welcome. What do you think about that phenomenon? Do you see it?
I talk to my students about it. For example, when we talk about communication theories like spiral of silence, I often ask my students, they think that, a Trump supporter who sits in this classroom might decide not to speak up because they feel that the classroom as a whole is more liberal. Of course, it also changes between universities and areas. I mean, you're sitting in Texas, I'm sitting in West New York, different kind of cultural backgrounds. My view on that is a bit complicated. I think that on one hand, we should absolutely do whatever we can to have a diverse discussion with our students. I want to hear the two sides of every argument. When I'm coming to a class, even in some of the most politicized kind of topics, and again, we are communication scholars, we work on politicized topics. I mean, I can't teach without touching politics and, topics like abortion and gun control. Those are at the heart of understanding media today. I do want to hear both sides of the argument on every topic, and I try to encourage my students who do not agree with me on topics to speak up in class. I don't know how much it works, but I think that we will need to draw a line at some point, and I think that line should be determined by two things, and it goes back to social media and free speech. First of all, does the freedom of speech comes at the expense of people's safety? And second, do we get to the point where some opinions or views are in stark contradiction to the core values of small L, liberal democracy, small L, not the liberals, but liberal democracy.
Differentiate, because I think that a lot of people argue the classic liberalism is under attack. That people who believe that an open debate, a open marketplace of ideas is under attack, and even liberals are afraid to speak up on college campuses these days, and of course on social media. There is a real penalty for open speech these days.
Yes, that's true. And I like to think of myself as not sitting on the extreme of any of these potential views. But I do think that sustaining a healthy and stable democracy requires balancing all kinds of rights. I think in the United States, we are primed to think about the First Amendment as kind of the leading, most important kind of perspective to cherish and protect, which is fine. We are communication researchers. We believe in the First Amendment. We want to protect free speech, and we want to protect the media and journalists, against harassment from the government, which was the main goal of the First Amendment. But, Guy, one thing that we used to do at least pretty well in Israel, like in the 90s when we were kids, is teaching children that democracy is about balancing between rights that often contradict one another, right? That's the game of democracy. It's always been. You want to give a person the right to do whatever they want. You want to give a person freedom, but not if that means that this person is going to hurt somebody else. So I have a right to say whatever I want, but if I'm threatening to, if I'm inciting individuals to commit a violent act against people, now my right for speech comes at the expense of somebody else's right for safety, which brings us back to social media and moderation. Why was Donald Trump removed from Twitter and Facebook? Not because he was conservative, not because he said unpopular opinions. He was removed after he used the platform that he had that allowed him to approach tens of millions of individuals to incite violence that put the life of people, including his own vice president, Mike Pence, at risk. So his account was suspended not after he lied on it. He lied a lot on it. They never suspended his account. Not after he promoted conspiracy theories. Not after he said racist and misogynistic stuff there every day. The accounts were suspended when he used it to incite a violent coup attempt that included people calling for hanging the vice president, Nancy Pelosi, and others in Capitol Hill. So this is where a democracy needs to start defending its citizens and not, promoting only one right while forgetting that people have other rights that are not just freedom of speech.
And the next day did not suspend the accounts of the Ayatollah of Iran and the heads of the Taliban. So again, content moderation, very problematic issue. Yeah. No doubt. But I think one more thing I want to talk to you about is the crisis of trust in the media, in universities, in government, and in elite institutions such as technology companies. We see this. Every single survey shows diminishing trust over the years. What is the solution over here?
So, first of all, I think we should put it in perspective. There is a decline in trust in every institution. So if you look at research over the last 50 years or so, even more, we become more and more distrusting of banks, of the media, of the government, of Congress. If I remember correctly, there is only one institution that doesn't lose a lot of trust, which is the army. Science, everybody's losing confidence other than the army, which means that the answer is probably a more sociological one. We're probably going through some changes in how we experience the world and how we experience organizations and institutions and the whole notion of expertise and so on and so on. I think the internet also kind of accelerated this process by kind of challenging. Okay, this is the one word you don't want me to use in a podcast, but challenging the epistemological kind of authority of bodies of knowledge, right? So when I was a kid, which is not that long ago, if I wanted to learn about, let's say, I don't know, Brazil, I had to write an assignment for class about Brazil, I had to go to the library and open an encyclopedia and sit and read what the editors of this encyclopedia thought was an appropriate description of what Brazil is, right? When I was a kid and wanted to travel to London, I had to call my travel agent to like find me an airplane and find me a hotel, and I should trust her that she knows London better than me. The internet kind of broke it down. It really eroded our trust in experts to a large degree because it exposed us to a lot of other voices, but also it gave us the efficacy to do things without them, right? So if I want to know what disease I have, I can arguably just search on WebMD and get I put the symptoms in and it tells me, oh, it's this and that. You should drink, hot tea. If I want to travel to London now, I don't need a travel agent to do that for me. I'll just go online and find the best hotel, right? If I want to learn about COVID, why should I listen to Anthony Fauci? I can go to Reddit or TikTok or YouTube or Instagram and, listen to whoever I want.
Well, and one more thing that we found out that experts are wrong often. I mean, that's another thing that the internet did for us. I mean, back in the day, how often have we had so-called experts on CNN, on Fox News, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, who explain things to us that turn out to be completely false? I mean, this is so true for foreign affairs, right? I mean, we see it over and over and over. These so-called experts have been exposed by the internet as people who are often wrong. So they have big titles, but often they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Right, Yotam.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
I have to respond to this.
Yes, please do.
This is too important to skip.
Yes,
you're absolutely right. Experts make mistakes. But, and here is the big surprise, maybe for many people, mistakes by scientists, for example, let's take science. Mistakes are not a bug. They are a feature of science. Science is a reliable way of knowing because it's a self-correcting enterprise. The reason I trust science is because we make hypotheses, we test them, we are willing to admit that our hypotheses are wrong, and we are willing to revisit what we thought we already knew and test it again and again and again in a skeptical way, healthy skeptical way. That's what separates science from dogma and faith, where you begin with a set of, assumptions that are not to be challenged, and then you explain everything in the world in a way that's going to fit those assumptions. Yes, experts make mistakes, of course, but we all know that. I mean scientists, when I publish a paper, I'm not saying that the findings that I have from my experiment are final. I'm saying this is what I found, and I invite other researchers to replicate, to revisit, to try to do it a bit differently. And if they find out that I'm wrong, I'm not sad. That's how science works. I'm accepting change, which might make science such an important,
that's science. I'm talking more about weapons of mass destruction, the invasion of Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi in Libya, which led to a bloody civil war. I mean, lots of foreign policy mistakes.
Sure.
We're not going to talk about all of them today, right?
All the governments and all the presidents ever. I have a list that I show my students in a class dedicated to misinformation. Every president ever lied to his people at one point or another. As you said, the Bush administration lied to us about Iraq, and Obama said wrong things about who will get and not get to keep their doctors. And George H.W. Bush said no new taxes. Okay, we can go on. Reagan was dealing with Iran and the Contra, right? And you could go back to George Washington and those guys, and they lied too once in a while. Lincoln was lying about.
I'm surprised you didn't throw Trump in there, but go ahead.
No, that's almost too easy. But even Abraham Lincoln, who we call Honest Abe, right? He was lying to his own party about the other party's will to make a peace treaty. You can see a really nice kind of depiction on it in the Steven Spielberg's Lincoln movie. Anyway. Point is, sure, governments are sometimes lying to us, but what's the alternative? I mean, if we are losing trust in every official, source of information, if we are trying to push for a kind of almost libertarian approach of every statement has the same weight and every statement should be considered in the same seriousness, the result will be chaos. I mean, nobody said, I don't think any serious, expert ever said that expertise is perfect or that expert systems are perfect or that government is perfect.
The alternative is an open marketplace of ideas where a big light can shine and allow both sides of the story to help find the truth. All right. Thank you very much, Yotam.
No.
This is a great conversation. I'll give you the final word. Final word. Go.
Final word from me. Okay. Sure, the alternative to governments and systems and expertise, based institutions is just to let everybody speak up. And Mark Zuckerberg told us in 2010 in an interview to Time, he told us that if you just let people do whatever they want, if you don't moderate them, if you don't regulate them, the best stuff will flow up. The best songs will be shared, and the best news articles will be shared, and the best opinions will be shared. And that's the libertarian model of information. But Mark Zuckerberg should have known better. First, because not all people want to share the most, accurate and high quality information. Some people actually like to spread racist, misogynistic, garbage. And second, those platforms were never free. Even in its most free, kind of version, Facebook was always using algorithms that prioritize sensational and emotional content over high quality, accurate information. So the playfield was never level. Anyway, all of those topics are complicated. I don't think there is, a black and white here, but I think the whole Mastodon versus Post versus Facebook versus Twitter debate of the last couple of weeks just reminds us how vulnerable social media is, how not social it is, how much it's not in our hands, but in the hands of a bunch of billionaires who play with it like a toy. I think what you and I can agree on is that we need to start thinking in a more systematic way on what social media is, who should be in control of it, and what barriers, if any, we should put on it.
Professor Yotam Ophir, excellent conversation. Thank you so much for your input today.
Thank you.